The Spin-off Podcast Network.
This is Kiwi is back for a brand new season with more inspiring kōrero from special guests including rugby player, father and role model TJ Perenara.
My family bring me joy. Rugby brings me joy too, but it's not the same joy as my family brings me.
And global dancer and choreographer Kirsten Dodgen.
For some reason, people think I'm very intimidating.
Listen to the new season of This is Kiwi, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in collaboration with KiwiBank. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spin-off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of The Real Pod. The people asked, and I'm going to do it, basically because I want to see if I can. This is Monopod. If you're a big fan of Alex and Jane, I apologise, you will not hear them even once on this episode. Basically because this topic is extremely interesting to a small group of people, and I do not think that they are in that group, or at the very least, they're letting me indulge myself. My name's Duncan Grieve. I am one of the three hosts of The Real Pod, and this is a monopod dedicated to today's crazy news about Three. So what I'm going to do over the next, I don't know exactly how long, is run through the events as they happened, talk about how the story came to me, talk about what I think it means. TV3 is now for sale, if you haven't already heard. What does that mean? Who might buy it? Will it be bought? And just some general thoughts about the channel and its legacy, because this is very much a different moment for it. I will thank our beloved Nando's. They sponsor this podcast. They're freaking delicious. I had some yesterday. You should have some today. I want to thank Alice Webb-Little. She is in the producer chair right now. She's the only other human in this room. So however this goes, she will be my witness, and I appreciate her giving up Friday drinks to be here. So this morning, I get up very early. Regular listeners may be aware of this. I got up at 5 a.m. to a text message that had arrived a half hour earlier asking me to call them urgently. This was a source informing me that something big was about to happen. I got on the phone and they told me that Three was being broken apart from the rest of MediaWorks, was being readied for sale, that Flower Street, which has been TV3's long time, potentially only home, certainly as long as I've been aware of them, was going to be sold, that something really big was brewing. In case you don't know about MediaWorks, MediaWorks is basically a holding company that owns sort of three main sets of assets, maybe four. It owns a bunch of radio stations like The Edge, My FM, and so on. Magic Talk, which together comprise roughly 50% of New Zealand's radio industry. They're really profitable. Last year, it merged with QMS, an outdoor advertising company. That's really profitable. It has a bunch of digital assets, which realistically probably don't make any money, the likes of the News Hub site, 3Now, various radio station websites, but also don't cost a crazy amount to run for the most part. The biggest thing it owns in terms of its visibility, its impact, its audience, is Three, formerly known as TV3. For basically, ever since they launched, they have been the biggest and a lot of the time the only free-to-air competitor to the state-owned TVNZ. So Three's had a checkered ownership history. It's been owned by Canadians. It's been owned by banks, by basically a lot of the time it's had debt, sometimes huge debt, up to sort of 700 million, and it's been bankrupt a couple of times, but it's always survived. And its current owner is a venture capital firm called Oaktree. They basically bought some of its debt at a discount in 2012 and assumed full ownership in 2015. And ever since then, it's been for sale. But what they were always trying to do was sell all of MediaWorks. So sell the radio assets, sell the digital, sell this group of media assets, which they believed were more than the sum of their parts. And I think over the past few years, there's been a dawning realization that, in fact, they were always less than the sum of their parts. That, in fact, because the TV operation, while it was very popular and visible, it wasn't quite as attractive as the radio assets. Radio is an amazing medium. Like, people just stay with it. It's the sort of, I don't know, it's the great cockroach of media. People still listen to it. You go to workplaces, you get into your car, the radio's still on. I mean, there might be some audience decline, but nothing like that of TV, which has been massively hit by social media, by YouTube, particularly by video on demand, the likes of Netflix and so on. Just anything competing for your time in this attention economy. So there has been this realization that MediaWorks without 3 would be worth much more than MediaWorks with 3, but there was a sort of a stubbornness because Oaktree didn't want to sell just some of it. Then what was it going to do with what was left? So they, for the longest time, they sort of held out to try and sell the package. At various times, the likes of Sky have kicked around trying to buy the TV assets, maybe trying to buy the whole thing, but they've always resisted. And I think probably now they've lost a lot of value by resisting overtures at various times. But today, as my source told me that this thing was finally going to happen, and not only was 3 going to be readied for sale, which is no small thing. Like, some people are acting like we've known this the whole time. We really haven't. We've known that MediaWorks was for sale. Actually, taking 3 and ripping it out of the rest of MediaWorks is not easy. It has a combined sales operation. It has a combined news operation and news hub, which was actually a relatively recent development and did make the company significantly harder to pry apart. It has, one of its flagship shows is the AM show, which plays on Magic Talk and on 3. And so it's not going to be an easy thing, but they're just going to go through the process now. But the big thing that my source emphasized, and this hasn't been particularly picked up or backed up, so to a certain extent I'm exposed on this part of it, is that if they don't find a buyer, that they will shut it. Now, that's in some ways the sort of the natural implication of all this, and of course the network isn't going to admit that because they're trying to sell it. And if you admit that that you're willing to shut it, A, it implies that its value is low, and B, it shows your hand a bit. I guess the thing that I find, I don't know, it's just a really poignant situation, because as much as regular listeners will know, that I love the media game. I'm a huge Succession fan. I read about it. I find this moment, as much as it's like terrifying, and the spin-off's its own little media company, and we have to deal with the realities of it all the time. It's also just because of these huge tectonic forces at work, and because of the outsized kind of sort of scale it assumes in people's minds, outsized compared to the size of the business it is anyway. It has it has these stars, and it's just quite fun to watch when you get in the habit of it. But when it comes down to it, like, these are people's jobs. These are people's lives. There are people at 3 who've been there for decades. In fact, Guy Williams wrote a very affecting, shocking really, because it's not what he's known for, but quite a moving piece about his 10 years at 3, working with John Campbell, describing Hilary Barry, teaching an intern how to put a clip together 20 minutes before she's on air. And it's always had that kind of feel about it as a company, like a sort of a scrappy, like kind of kid brother family type of an operation. Like whereas TVNZ had this kind of born to rule there about it, which I think to its credit it is losing a bit. 3 never had anything handed to it. It never had enough money. Guy talks about the fact that it was always leaking from the roof and also to other media, which has been quite fun. But, you know, like there was just a particular energy about it. Certainly for me growing up, I always watched 3, always felt like that was my home channel. And I think that's true for like a generation of people. And a lot of us probably, you know, and to a certain extent you saw with the like Save Campbell Live thing, like there were a lot more people mad about Campbell Live being shut than were actually watching Campbell Live at the time. And that kind of, you know, and that's true of 3. Like I'm sentimentally attached to 3. I actually watch a lot more of it than most probably. But I think a lot of people, why they're mad about this, why they're sad about this is bound up to a certain extent in a nostalgia for what the channel has meant to them over the years. And I guess, you know, that is a big thing. But fundamentally, this is about a lot of people and a lot of jobs and an industry. It's not like you can just rely on, you know, you can go to the next media company down the road because they're hiring. Like this will really, really sting. And it, you know, it's not just about 3. Like 3 commissions a huge amount of local content. The source I spoke to suggested 30% of the local production industry's content for New Zealand was commissioned by 3. You know, Real Pod listeners will know that the reality TV slate that we talk about is, you know, the lion's share of it is on 3. Warner Brothers, which makes that, I'm sure that 3 are by far its biggest client. Like, there are a lot of people waking up to the news that that they might not, that they don't know whether their workplace will be around for all that much longer. So, yeah, so my source suggested that whatever is going to happen quickly, that it could be as soon as Christmas that they announce either a sale or a closure. I really am not in a position to say whether the closure by Christmas thing is needlessly alarmist. To a certain extent, the story, which I reported earlier in the week about them not renewing Guy Williams' show, suggests that this was a company really trying to hold back on its liabilities. You know, that even the $25,000 an episode it was going to have to pay to screen New Zealand Today next year was something that it didn't want to have on its books, which is exactly the kind of thing you do when you're readying a business for sale. With hindsight, when I saw that, I should have known exactly what they were communicating, but I'm not that smart. So what do we know now? The news is out. It's been a predictably huge story. I actually sat on it for a couple of hours so that 3 could communicate with its own staff, which is not the normal journalistic thing to do, but just, I don't know, this is our industry. It feels kind of like, as much as I enjoy reporting on it, there's something, I don't know, it's starting to get really tight. The whole year I've been reporting on the media, and there are times people have sort of insinuated or straight up said that there's been a level of exaggeration, or accused me in being kind of cahoots with MediaWorks. Certainly I did an interview with Michael Anderson, the MediaWorks CEO, earlier this year, where he basically speculated about the end of 3 and talked about the need for structural change in the industry, because TVNZ is just such a beast in the broadcast world in terms of how much of the revenue it takes up. And on the day that interview was released, Hal Crawford wrote an editorial critiquing TVNZ, Duncan Garner dimmed the lights. So there's definitely been some theatre about this stuff. I should say that I just put out the piece. I didn't know that they were going to do that stuff. I am sympathetic to that claim, but I also think that TVNZ is doing exactly the right thing by its owners and shareholders. This is just a complicated scenario. But, so there has been a lot of people over the past year saying the media has been talking about the sky falling in for 10 years. why is this year any different? I think we're starting to see that it is different. To me, there's manifestly, like, you watch all of the lines coming in together, like a very profitable business at the start of the decade with some shadows on the horizon. Now those margins are coming in really close together, and MediaWorks is losing money. NZME and stuff are still making money, but every year they're losing huge chunks of their revenue, and there is no way for them to take huge chunks out of their cost base. I actually spoke to an analyst called Matt Henry from Forsyth Bar an hour or so ago, who gave me a quote that totally chilled me to the bone, which I'll repeat to you now. This is basically about the media in general, particularly newspapers, but he said in the US, they're often owned by companies which are milking them for cash flow. These things are dying assets. Let's milk them for cash while we still can, which is to say that, all over America, there are sort of city newspapers, in your mid-sized towns, which are throwing off somewhere between 10 and 20, $30 million a year. But then the next year, it'll be $20 million. The next year, it'll be 10. You can hold on to costs, take 30, 40 million out before that they, the margin disappears entirely. And then the end of it, you just throw it away. And it just hits you in the chest, that because ultimately the media isn't like other businesses. Like, there is a sort of, I'm not against the idea of creative destruction, of new models coming along that upset the old thing. And yes, it's always super sad when people lose their jobs, but new jobs are created. The thing is, all of the things which have disrupted media, Facebook, Trade Me, Google, Netflix is an exception, but all of the things which have disrupted journalism, taking away the advertising revenue, they don't create any journalism. The number of journalists in New Zealand has gone from about 4,500 in 2006, I think, to around 2,000 now. This is just a giant shrinking that is going on in this country and all over the world. So the idea that we could just, that the media is just something that's going to disappear, well, there's a cost to that, and it is the cost is journalism and culture more broadly. What are the chances that 3 avoids that fate? I think that rests on who might buy it. So I'll just run through a few scenarios. Firstly, Sky is one that's been talked about. Mark Jennings wrote a piece for Newsroom discussing that possibility. He makes some good points, particularly that 3, with its bigger audience, give it give it some of the Sky Sport catalogue, give it some of the amazing stuff, HBO kind of things that they have on Soho. I mean, Sky has just the biggest, it's got 100 channels. It can fill 3. It can make 3 the best channel in New Zealand if it wants, and the biggest billboard for Sky as well. The problem is Sky has already acquired Rugby Pass for $60 million. It's acquired the rugby rights for 5 years, but that cost like $400 million and 5% of its company. Do they have the appetite to swallow another loss-making company when they're dealing with their own big digital transition? It just seems like that might be a consolidation too far, even for someone as bullish as new Sky CEO Martin Stewart. So on balance, I think Sky's possible, but I don't necessarily believe it. Channel 7 is one that's been talked about. Channel 7 acquired Great Southern, which is one of the biggest New Zealand production houses, a year or two ago. They have a huge catalogue of Australian reality shows and just programming in general. Is there a world where they go, okay, we'll acquire 3, put it into receivership, strip out a lot of, its ongoing contracts and some employment agreements, and fill it with Australian content, take a little bit of New Zealand through New Zealand On Air, try and get some savings there? There totally is. But again, it's just, New Zealand's such a small market. This is the big thing with an overseas acquirer. Melbourne and Sydney are as big and certainly richer markets than all of New Zealand, and you have to really sort of believe that there is a big future in linear television to want to do that. And I don't know, that's just a hard one to see, especially given what's been happening to ratings this year, which seem, to my untrained eye, like they're really going down at the moment. TVNZ is another acquirer. I think it would be a really bad optical move for the government to buy this channel once it's got to its knees and assume a monopoly over broadcast news. I can see them, if it were to fall over, sort of cherry picking the best assets, getting sort of 7 days and some of their sort of premium programming and personnel assets. Can totally see that happening, but it would just look pretty gross for the government to do it, I think. CBS did a turnaround with Channel 10 in Australia. I had someone email me today to say that that's not the craziest thing in the world. They're a family-run company. So they do things quite far-sightedly. They are in a sort of an expansionist mood. It's just New Zealand. It's little. It's such a little country. And there's always the chance, some ambitious person shells out, because the thing is you buy it very cheaply. Like, yes, this is a really big company, but you can have it for, a few $1 million probably. And if you really back yourself, maybe as an independent you can get something done. But it's just to get audiences that compete against Netflix and all of the amazing content that is available free or cheap from around the world, you have to have local content. That's your big differentiator. What is the single thing that you know about local content? It's really freaking expensive to make. And that is just the reality. And I just don't know how you sort of close those two loops. So what are the implications of this? New Zealand On Air, this is a massive thing for them. They have waited for decades to get out from the duopoly, or the functional duopoly of 3 and TVNZ, with a little bit of Prime. In the last couple of years, the likes of us, Newsroom, Stuff, Coconut have started receiving sort of some fairly small amounts of New Zealand On Air money to do different stuff, but there's been you can tell that New Zealand On Air is really enjoying the fact that it is a much more competitive marketplace. That in the past, it used to be that 3 and TVNZ basically talked about their money. How are we going to spend our $30 million or $50 million on shows from New Zealand On Air? That New Zealand On Air has started saying no to 3 and TVNZ lately. I think they've really enjoyed that. If 3 goes away, they're probably the single most challenged organisation out the back of this, because they will go back to basically being a client state of TVNZ. TVNZ will get easily 80% of that budget between TVNZ 1, 2, Duke and TVNZ On Demand. That will give the commissioners at TVNZ power like they haven't had since the 80s. And I don't know, I really respect TVNZ. We work with them. I don't think that's a great thing necessarily for New Zealand to have that much power concentrated in a single entity. And also it makes the case for New Zealand On Air a bit more of a struggle. Like, should the government just direct fund this giant thing that it owns and let New Zealand On Air just play with the smaller players? That's definitely on the table. And, if this goes through, I mean, this is the thing. Hold on, I'm going to take a drink of beer. I'm going to dry mouth. Okay. This is basically why I think we should all be perturbed by it. I've seen people getting real excited about, it serves them right for hiring Mark Richardson. Mark Richardson is a very, very talented broadcaster. You might just disagree with him politically, but he's real good at what he does. You just have to hear his voiceovers on the block. He's freakishly talented. He works about 115 hours a day. Mike Richardson is not the problem. And by the way, if 3 goes under, who's getting a job the next day? Mark Richardson. You are not seeing the back of him. Mark Richardson is not the problem. The problem is journalism and our media and just locally produced anything. Because fundamentally, if 3 goes, who's next? Stuff doesn't have any radio assets. Every year its profit goes down. It was just put on sale. No one wanted to buy it. It's almost certainly going to have more closures, more losses. It's being run as well as it possibly could. I'm a huge, huge admirer of Sinead Boucher, Stuff's chief executive. But fundamentally, absent something changing, absent some kind of government relief, I don't see that Stuff at this scale is able to provide the extraordinary free service of a national news coverage with hundreds of stories a day that it does. I just don't see how that happens. The Herald, it's put up this paywall. A lot of people hate the Herald. Again, I disagree with you. I think you're just I get that you don't like Mike Hosking. That's fine. Also, a really talented broadcaster who get a job anywhere the next day. Yeah, his columns are totally trolling, and I think he's kind of a monster. But fundamentally, what Mike Hosking does for News Talk ZB, the fact it's put on the Herald, look, it's bad brand collateral damage, but I understand why they do it. Like it's a cheap way of recirculating their talent. But they've bitten the bullet. They put all their best work behind a paywall. It's going pretty well. They've got, I think at last count, 15,000 subscribers. I'm sure it's more than that now. I feel like the Herald needs 100,000 subscribers to make it a viable business. And city the size of Auckland, even country the size of New Zealand, are there 100,000 paying subscribers? I hope so. I don't know. And then we're screwed. If we lose those three companies, those are the three big private newsrooms, then we just have government-owned news. And this is the thing that Hal Crawford, Michael Anderson, Jesse Mulligan said on the project this week. They've been saying the whole time, and everyone looks at them and says, this is special pleading, you're full of shit, you're just, you're just trying to leverage and lobby and not just getting your business in order. But it's true. Like, it would be freaking weird if the only big newsrooms in the country were owned by the government. And I don't see how that changes. I do think that there will need to be some form of intervention, whether that is the decommercialising of TVNZ1, which will basically be at best a short-term fix, but short-term fix is 5 years in this context. And that's more than... like. None of us can see that far. Like it's hard out here. I feel really lucky to work at the spin-off. Love my colleagues, love our business model. We're going through a tough patch right now. That's why I really appreciate your support as members. But fundamentally, we're a small, nimble organisation, and we will gut out this period. The big ones, it's just so much harder for them. So many of their costs are structural and baked in, but they provide this unbelievably important essential service, which is journalism for this country. Sorry for being so earnest. But I genuinely think this is a bigger story than the public knows. Like the risks to these newsrooms are very serious, and they're not. And while I like Chris Farfoy and met with him a few weeks ago, I think he's a very genuine person. I still don't know if anyone there understands just how intense it is. Okay, that's basically all I want to say. If this is the beginning of the end of 3, I'll be really sad. I grew up watching that station. I know a lot of people who work there. I'm a huge admirer of the culture it had. When I was first starting out the spin-off, the vibe I wanted was like the sort of 90s, 2000s, 3 vibe, like a little bit naughty, heaps of fun. You go super hard, you're creative with low resource, you try and attract young talent and just let them run. Like that seemed to me the most fun and cool thing that you could possibly do in this industry. Obviously, they've done basically all my favorite reality TV. We're recapping Next Top Model at the moment. Mass was a shit show, but, broadly speaking, they have really committed to it over the past few years, and it's been super fun to talk about. People don't consider that culture, but I do, and I love seeing the country through that lens. Most of all, I'll just miss the idea of television as a great unifier, and irrespective of what happens to TV3, that is something that is going. That idea that we all gathered around the brightly lit box in the corner room, watched similar things, could talk about it the next day. When something happened, we all did it together. That is no longer a thing. And really, I think a lot of the emotion around this, irrespective of the jobs loss, which is a totally separate issue, that's the thing that we're pining for, and like I miss that too. And I really hope that 3, which in general I think has done a good job under trying circumstances, I hope it gets to keep battling. I hope this is just another of these crazy war wounds in its 30-year battling lifespan. I hope it's not terminal. Thoughts are with everyone at 3 and MediaWorks right now, and I think that might be the end of my monopod. I hope it was not the worst and most boring thing in the world. If it was, I swear to you, I won't do another one for a while. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Nando's. See you next week.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.